Hello. You may notice that I am not Stan Garnett, but I am in fact an alum of the Boulder County District Attorney's Office, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Michael Dougherty. You've been introduced to him a couple of times because he's one of our members, so I'm not going to talk about his biography, but I will say that we are very lucky to have someone who's worked in Manhattan who came to us to work on an innocence project through the Attorney General's office. And when he took over the District Attorney's office here in Boulder, people were very, very pleased that he was going to work a lot on criminal justice reform. I think that a lot of people don't really know what the District Attorney's office does. It has about 33 deputy district attorneys that work on their docket. It works on the entire county of Boulder's criminal charges, and that can be about 2,500 felonies and about 15,000 misdemeanors and traffic cases. So every one of those attorneys has a huge docket. In addition to that, they work on a lot of education and trust building throughout our community. Every district attorney works with dozens of agencies. They have to learn all kinds of different things, and Michael is working with all of those employees and those problems, and also outreach into the community. So I hope that you will take a look at the cool little brochure on your tables and welcome our speaker, Michael Dougherty.
Thank you so much, Cassie. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay in the back? All right, great. I am so excited to be a member of this club, so speaking with you today is a real special honor for me, and I appreciate the kind introduction. And Cassidy mentioned Stan Garnett, a fellow Rotarian of ours, of course, and I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize Stan for the work he's done for the community over the many years that he was district attorney. In fact, coming in as his successor, the reason we've been able to do so many innovative things is because he built a really strong district attorney's office. Stan brought in outstanding women and men as attorneys, investigators, and support staff, and they've been doing great, great work. So following in his big footsteps, my job's a lot easier because of the great work he did on behalf of the community. I'm going to be going through a PowerPoint today as we talk about it. And what I want to talk about with you today is the balance between preserving public safety, which is important to all of us, right? When I wake up in the morning, my neighbors want to know that their kids are safe, that if something happens to them or their home or their jobs, that we're going to make sure justice is done. But at the same time, I strongly believe, and I'm very passionate about, being innovative and progressive when it comes to criminal justice reform and making sure our tax dollars, your tax dollars, are put to the best possible use to enhance the public safety and make this community even better than it is today for tomorrow. So Stan and I have talked a lot about this before I took office. One thing Stan told me that I'll share with you is, he said, you know, you're going to have to get used to people recognizing you everywhere you go. And I kind of shrugged that off, to be honest. I thought, I'm just a regular looking guy. But sure enough, at the soccer field, in the locker room, which, by the way, I don't love that part, at the supermarket with my kids, people keep coming up to me. And I accept that that's part of the role and the responsibility that I have. But I'll share with you, I was at a coffee shop recently in the morning on my way to work, and the guy on line in front of me keeps looking back, and he's looking back, and he's looking back. And I'm seeing, and I keep waiting for him to say, "You're the district attorney." And he finally turns around and he goes, "I'm really sorry to bother you." I'm like, "It's no bother." He goes, "You probably get this all the time." I'm like, I nod. He goes, "You look just like the district attorney." I nod. He goes, "From Batman." I said, "Oh, no one's ever said that to me before." He's like, "Oh, you were nodding." I'm like, "Well, that's because I actually am the district attorney." He's like, "Get out of here." I'm like, "No, I really am the district attorney." He's like, "You're pulling my leg." I'm like, "No, I am the district attorney of Boulder." He's like, "You look just like Harvey Dent." He goes, and then he says, "Isn't that so cool that you look like the DA from Batman? And you are the DA?" And I say, "Yes, except in the movie, Harvey Dent becomes a villain, and his face gets burnt off, and he gets killed at the end." And the guy goes, "Yeah, that's true. Maybe you don't want to talk about that so much." So Whether hero or villain, or just trying to do our best to do justice, what is the role of a district attorney? It is to do justice in every single case, and enhancing public safety while also being thoughtful about how best the criminal justice system can serve those that come through the doors of the courthouse and the community at large. I will tell you, when I became a prosecutor many, many years ago in New York City, the district attorney who hired me said, make sure you do justice every day. Don't come here to rack up convictions like notches in a gun belt. Your job is to do the right thing to the best of your ability. And I'll tell you a funny story about him, actually, because many years later, he asked me to join his executive staff and help run the office day to day, an office of 1,300 people. And I was extremely honored. I was very young at the time, and I remember sitting in the waiting room outside his office, and the woman who was leaving to go work for the governor of New York, who I was then replacing on the executive staff, she came by and she said, you know, Mike, I actually feel bad for you. I said, bad for me? This is the greatest honor of my career. Why? I'm so grateful. Why would you feel bad? And she's like, well, the district attorney is 86 years old, and he's not going to last forever. He's 86. She goes, and I'm going to go work for a governor who's 46, who could be the next president of the United States. I said, I don't view it that way, but I appreciate you saying it. A year later, she was back in my office because the governor had gotten involved and embroiled in a prostitution scandal, and she had lost her job as part of that, and she came back to the Manhattan DA's office. So the lesson there, of course, don't ever underestimate older folks. But I'm so passionate about the work we're doing and the role of justice in our community. We're all familiar with Lady Justice, of course, the blindfold, to make sure that justice is done without bias, without influence. The scales, to make sure that it's always fair and always balanced. And the sword, to make sure that the force is there to enforce the laws when it's necessary. So we'll talk about public safety as the top priority for the district attorney's office here in Boulder. I have on the screen there some of our priority cases, violent cases including sex assaults, domestic violence, and of course murder cases. Crimes against the most vulnerable, children, our elderly, those with disabilities, repeat felony offenders, and I'll talk more about them a little later on, and then financial fraud cases. And the reason financial fraud is on here is because unlike a crime that could be committed once, if I asked you raise your hand if you know someone who's ever driven under the influence just once, I imagine most hands go up. Financial fraud is a different kind of crime. It's someone waking up every single day seeking to steal from another individual. And I've met with people who've been impacted and victimized by financial fraud in my career as a prosecutor, and the impact there is just devastating. So we put a lot of effort into these cases as well. So crimes against people, but also crimes against their livelihoods. And public safety is a top priority for our office. We do face some challenges here in Colorado, including here in Boulder. Crime rates are going up every year. The budget in my office is a challenge, which I'll touch briefly on. And one thing I want to stress as we go through this is, how do we track success? In other words, if someone doesn't commit a crime, that never becomes a statistic, right? I can't tell you number of murders not committed last year, right? Number of assaults not committed because the person used better judgment. Number of DUIs actually not taking place because the person used better judgment. So those things are hard to track when we talk about success, but I'm going to talk about the crime rate and some of the challenges we have, and then some of the things we're doing in the office in response in an effort to make sure the system is working as well as it possibly can. So these are some of the numbers we have throughout the state of Colorado, just from 2016 through 2017. You can see the increase in criminal cases, 16% increase in homicide cases, felony DUI, which means the person has 3 prior DUI convictions and is now being arrested for the 4th DUI. So that's felony DUI cases. Someone once said to me, you know, DUIs are prosecuting people because they have drinking problems. I said, no, DUIs are prosecuting people because they're getting behind the wheel after they're drunk. And there's a real difference there, and it's about choices and the risk that people put the public in when they do so. And then misdemeanors have gone up as well. Boulder's not immune. I'm just going to touch on these numbers briefly. So this is Boulder from 2013 through 2018. What I would highlight here is, you see in 2013 we had 1,862 felonies filed in the district attorney's office. In 2018, just 5 years later, 1,000 more felonies, 300 more violent felonies. Those numbers are not unique to Boulder. This has been seen throughout the state of Colorado. And I'll tell you, why I believe that's happening in a couple minutes. But these numbers are a reality for us and something that jeopardizes, of course, the peacefulness of this great community, so it's something we focus a lot on. These are what are called mandatory reports for elder abuse. Under the law in Colorado, if someone believes that an individual has been abused either physically or financially, and they're above the age of 70, it triggers a mandatory report. These show the increase in mandatory reports from 2016, just 2 years ago, through 2018. So I'm going to go to the next slide in a second, but these numbers are also consistent with misdemeanor numbers and traffic offenses. So anytime you hear a prosecutor saying felonies have gone up, you should ask, well, what about misdemeanors? Has anything changed in terms of how you classify these offenses? And the answer is nothing has changed in terms of how we classify these criminal offenses, not under the law or not under our own internal policies. And also misdemeanors have gone up and traffic cases have gone up, as well as juvenile cases. And that's throughout the state of Colorado. And we'll talk about the why in a couple minutes. One thing that really surprised me when I became your district attorney was the budget of the DA's office. Because when I look outside and I drive around some, not all, but some of the neighborhoods in Boulder, I would have a certain impression of the resources in the district attorney's office. In fact, my neighbor, a good friend of mine, he said to me, it must be so great being DA in an office where you have everything you could ever want, every tool you could ever need. And I told him, I've never been in an office as resource-starved as the one I'm in right now. My first day as district attorney, the greatest day of my career, I went to the supply closet, and I opened it, and it was bare. And I thought, okay, so no pen and no paper for today. We should never have that in our district attorney's office. The work we do, in my humble opinion, is too important for that to exist. So we've been working very closely with the county commissioners. This screen, don't worry about the numbers so much. These colors are what I wanted to show you. Blue is Weld, red is Larimer, green is Boulder. So those three offices are all relatively the same size in terms of personnel and caseload. The overall budget of Weld going to public safety is 21%. Overall budget of Larimer is 17% to public safety. In Boulder, it's 11%. So that plays out both in personnel budget and operating budget. The reason that's really important to me as district attorney is it impacts our ability to do the best possible job for the community. So a really easy example would be the starting salary for attorneys coming out of law school. We're competing with Denver, Jeffco, Larimer, Weld, all the metro offices. And if you're coming out of law school with $150,000 in loans, and we pay $7,000 less per year, that $7,000 is a game changer for you. It might not be for you and I at this point in our lives, but if you're coming out of law school with that level of debt, that $7,000 makes decisions for you. So we've been working really hard with the county commissioners to get that change. We've made some progress already, and we're going to continue doing that. But I was really surprised, so I wanted to share this with you, and it's definitely going to be a priority for us going forward. So why the increase in the crime rate? Population growth. What I would highlight about population growth, we've seen a significant increase since 2013. In fact, if you line up the population of Colorado on a graph with the population of, with the increase in drug felonies, the two arcs are almost exactly the same. So some of that's just due to more people being in the state. Boulder has not seen a significant increase in our population, but it'd be a mistake to believe that people don't come to Boulder to visit and then engage in criminal conduct, or come to Boulder to engage in criminal conduct. In fact, Sheriff Pelley and I were recently talking about the population at the jail. On any given day, roughly 40% of the population are non-residents of Boulder County. So even though Boulder County has only seen a 1% increase in our population over the last few years, I think probably partly due to cost of living, we have a lot of people coming into Boulder County. So I think population growth is part of it. The drug epidemic is certainly a part of it. Throughout the state of Colorado, opioids, heroin, methadone have all gone up. And to me, we should put every effort we can into helping people who are in the cycle of addiction. Also being mindful of the fact that when someone's addicted to drugs, sometimes they have the overwhelming urge that drives them to commit property crimes. So bike thefts, car thefts, home break-ins, the porch thefts, those things are all on the increase as well. And in the rate of reoffense, this is something we can control. This is something that I'm passionate about. This is something where we could do better as a state. So when I say rate of reoffense, what I mean by that is people who commit another criminal offense after they've gone through the justice system. If we can lower that number, we do so much better for the community and for the offenders, for their future victims, and for the taxpayers, quite frankly. So rate of reoffense, where do we rate as a state when it comes to the rate of reoffense? So we have, if I ask 10 of you to stand up and then 5 sit down, that's the rate of success we're having in the Department of Corrections. In a 3-year period, 48% of all people released from state prison are back in state prison within 3 years. 48%. So if 10 stood up, they're being released from state prison right now, although something tells me they don't have flank steak and vanilla custard pie in state prison. But if 10 of you stood up, 5 of you are going to be back in state prison within 3 years. That's an absolute failure in my mind. If you think about your own businesses, your schools, what have you, if I said half of it was failing, you would say, well, something drastic needs to change. And how do we compare to other states? We rank 41st in the nation. We're in the bottom 10. The highest ranked state, surprisingly, is Texas, followed by California. Some of them have rates of reoffense as low as 20%. Our rate of reoffense is 48%. So think about the difference in numbers if we could do more to help people who are coming out of state prison. So that's why seeing Deborah here, my friend Deborah Simmons, who was the guest of Pam from the Reentry Initiative, the DA's office supports efforts like Deborah's and the Reentry Council to make sure that people who are coming back from state prison to our community or coming out of the jail to our community have the resources to get back on their feet and not reoffend. This is the number that drives me. This is the number where I think we could do better as a state. So we never want to just open the doors of every prison and say just head on out, right? That would lower the prison population, but would lead to headlines like this one, which was in the Denver Post back in 2016. So the answer is, what can we do for people who are coming through the criminal justice system? Obviously, they're in the criminal justice system because they've made bad decisions and they're in bad situations. What can we do to help them never return to the criminal justice system? So diversion and restorative justice, problem-solving courts, lifting the collateral consequences associated with convictions, with the goal being fewer cases for the community. So diversion and restorative justice are efforts to divert people out of the criminal justice system, assuming they're willing to accept responsibility. So goal of a classic diversion case that we handle in my office is 20-year-old young man is out with his friends, he gets intoxicated, and when he comes home, he knocks over your mailbox intentionally. He could be charged, prosecuted, and convicted and have a criminal conviction for the rest of his life, and that of course has an impact on his ability to get into school or to get a job. Or we could put him through diversion, where he's going to apologize to you, pay for the damage, complete community service, go through substance abuse treatment if that's what he needs, and then have the case dismissed if he complies with all those requirements. That 48% failure rate in the Department of Corrections state prison, compare that to our 92% success rate in our diversion program in my office. 92% complete the program and do not reoffend. Those are the kinds of numbers we want to see in the criminal justice system. Problem-solving courts. So for example, a veterans treatment court, drug treatment court, alcohol treatment court, to recognize the individual as an individual and make sure that we're helping them get back on their feet again. Lifting the collateral consequences of convictions when appropriate to make sure people can go on to have productive lives and jobs. And again, the goal being fewer cases. So let's talk about some of the initiatives we have in place. Our diversion program, as I mentioned, you could see how much more we're using our diversion program now in 2018 as opposed to when it started back in 2016. And again, with a 92% success rate, we're going to continue to pour resources into this. It is a top priority for me to ensure that we're doing the best possible job we can to make sure people do not reoffend. Because when I think of that 48% number, you can't point to that 48% number and tell me we're doing it well. No need to change anything. It's a perfect success. I think we have to push ourselves to try to improve the system and improve how we handle traditional problems. So we started the mental health diversion program with help from Sheriff Pelley, and Hans is here, and Hans has done a tremendous amount of work on this program as well. You know, Colorado ranks 43rd in the nation and mental health treatment available in the community. And so many people who come into the criminal justice system come in because they're in the midst of a mental health crisis. So doing a lot of work with law enforcement and mental health providers and the defense bar to get this program up and running, where low-level offenders will be diverted out of the jail and connected with mental health treatment in the community. We've secured the money for this program from the state and also from federal grants. So with no additional funding from Boulder, we've been able to set up this program. Moving on from marijuana, we have, as you know, as you probably have heard, legalized marijuana in the state of Colorado. And yet we still have people who have marijuana convictions that they have to report every time they apply for a job or apply for school. Marijuana is the one charge in my career. I've been doing this for 22 years. Marijuana is the one charge in my career that we actively prosecuted that is now legal. And I truly believe that as a government, we should lift the collateral consequences associated with those convictions if their conduct would otherwise be legal today, just as a matter of fundamental fairness. So my office launched this initiative 2 months ago. It's the first in the state of Colorado. And we're going back to eligible offenders to lift convictions from their records if they qualify. Bond reform. We want to make sure no one is being held in our jail simply for being poor. So if they're being held on, for example, a $1,000 bond, why does that matter? They're missing work and likely going to be fired. They're not providing for their children, they're not with their family, they're not paying their bills, and they get out and they're unemployed and they're more likely to reoffend. So trying to make sure that the right people are being held in the jail, and Sheriff Pelley's been a great champion to work with on this project. On the flip side of that, what I would say to you is I don't think money should be what determines who's being held or not, including dangerous offenders. So we had a guy recently who had 27 prior convictions. He should have been held without bond. He's a public safety risk. And the court set bond at $60,000 and assumed he would not get out. He made bond, he violated the protection order, and when the Longmont Police Department responded to the call from that victim, he engaged in a shootout with the Longmont Police Department, and he was shot and killed by police. But he never should have been out on bond. So we should do a much better job of identifying people who are a real public safety risk and those who could be trusted to go back into the community, including with monitoring and conditions. Immigrant protection and community outreach. Stan started this when he was DA, and it was a great effort on his part, and we've added to it now. Especially now, people who are immigrants in the community have anxiety about reporting to the police and the government. And you may have a different view of undocumented immigrants than the person sitting next to you. This is not about that. This is about making sure that immigrants who are the victim of a sex assault or domestic violence case report it to the police and come to the courthouse so we can get the perpetrator off the streets and ensure justice is done. So we go out in the community all the time. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. I have 11-year-old twins, and I always ask them, I got to go to this thing tonight. Do you want to come with me? And they, being wonderful kids, always say, no. But the other night, my son's like, yeah, I'll go. I'm like, oh, great. So we go up to this housing complex in Longmont. It was really incredible for him to see. I mean, everybody in the room speaks Spanish. They're clearly struggling. I mean, the community center they're in is kind of run down. Nice place, but run down. You could tell they're having a difficult time. And I start speaking, and my son's in the back, and I realize he's imitating me. I'm like, there are 3 things to say. And my son's like, 3 things to say. I'm like, I'm trying not to laugh. And I'm like, one thing I would say is, but him being there to see how important it is that people hear us say, you can report it to the police if you're a victim, you're not going to be deported. You can come to the district attorney's office. If you're a victim, you're not going to be deported. Here's how the system works, and walk them through that. A workplace sexual misconduct presentation, and if you currently own a business or work in a business, I would encourage you to think about this. In an effort to prevent, not just respond to, but prevent sexual harassment and sexual assault in the workplace, we teamed up with the private industry and CU to develop a presentation for employers to give to their employees, to help employers keep this from ever happening. You know, if you work for a big business, you walk in, they hand you a manual on HR policies. But if you own a construction site or a restaurant or a small office, you may not have those policies in place. If you invite us in, we come in for free, and we just explain to people, here is what the law requires in terms of how you handle yourself with your colleagues. and a conviction integrity unit to make sure that we don't have any wrongful convictions here in Boulder, but also to reinforce with the community that they can trust the integrity of government and the criminal justice system. So our goal is safer communities, productive members of the community, including those that have been through the criminal justice system. And don't get me wrong, there are people who come through the criminal justice system who have committed horrific acts. Sometimes for the very first time they've engaged in, as far as we know, criminal conduct. I just finished a murder trial 2 weeks ago. That guy had never been through the criminal justice system before. There's nothing that the system could have done to stop that tragedy from happening. And he's convicted and he'll spend the rest of his life in prison. And forgive me, but that's exactly what the right result was. But for the many, many, many people who come through the doors of the courthouse, they're usually coming in because they've made a mistake and need help getting back to a better place. Or they're dealing with a mental health crisis. Like this guy, Brent, I met at the homeless shelter, who shared with me that he has a mental health disorder and he's been arrested 25 times in the last 5 years. We should try to help him from hitting 30 or 35 or 40. Because every time he's arrested, it's an impact on his life, the tax dollars, the criminal justice system, and we just allow it to happen over and over and over again. So making sure that we have more productive members of our community. Also eliminating private prisons. We should not have private prisons in the state of Colorado. We currently have 3 that are operating for profit. They should be eliminated as of yesterday. And thank you. We don't allow judges, prosecutors, or public defenders to make a certain profit off their work. We shouldn't allow any correction facility to do so either, because they have every incentive to put the money back in their pocket, and that's why they have a lower success rate in terms of rehabilitation than state-run facilities do. So the prison should be run by the state, not by private corporations out to make an extra dollar. And I'm going to continue to fight for this because it's too important not to. So engaging in prevention and education, we do a lot of community crime prevention programs. If you want us to come out, again, they're all free. We'll do presentations on the IRS fraud scams, the telephone scams, all the things that we face. We want to cut down on how many people are being victimized. I'm on the do not call list. I feel like I'm on the please call me with another scam list. So we want to make sure, especially for our senior population who are often being sucked into these scams, we do a lot of crime prevention talks and education. Our goal is to help improve public safety in Boulder by being more progressive and innovative in how we tackle old problems. Because we also don't want this guy running around our town, right? That wasn't me, just in case you're wondering. I want to make that really clear. I Google image Batman in Boulder, and this is what came up, so. And this car, as you may know, is in the Tebow Car Museum in Longmont, although here it's on CU's campus. What questions do you have for me? Nathan.
Has consideration been made as to the increase in crime, felonies, and misdemeanors due to technology, body cams, raising doorbells, additional video cameras that are all around, making it easier to prosecute?
It's a great question. So the question is, has technology helped us apprehend individuals? I certainly think that's true, yes. So when I was, the second in command for the DA's office in Jefferson and Gilpin counties, we saw a crime or a felony filing rate spike in Gilpin because the casinos in Black Hawk went to a new security system and they were catching everybody doing everything. On the other hand, technology also leads to more victimization. So identity theft, computer crimes, technology is also used by perpetrators of crime, so I'd have to go try to figure out which number is higher, but I think there's a balance there, that yes, the technology gets better and allows us to do a better job, but at the same time, criminals are now using technology. I mean, gone are the days where a perpetrator has to mug you on the street for your wallet. There's a ton of other ways for them to get your credit card number without you ever getting an eyeball on them, and they sit behind the safety of their computer and do the exact same kind of thing now.
So I'm curious, you talked a lot about state statistics. I'm wondering how often you and your counterparts around the state get together, what your take is on what other district attorneys around the state are doing, and what is the leader of the whole operation, Attorney General, doing to impact these numbers?
great question. So every month, all the elected district attorneys, the attorney general, and the U.S. attorney, who's the federal prosecutor, come together and meet. And DAs from all around the state, there are 22 elected district attorneys in the state of Colorado. We all come together once a month. We talk about some of the things I've hit on here. We talk about different policies our office is launching. We compare notes and so on. And the attorney general is definitely a very active part of those discussions. And I anticipate that he'll be a good working partner going forward.
Michael, as you know, here at Boulder Rotary, we get the last word.
Yes.
Wish we had more time for questions because we're all very proud to have you as one of our members and all of all the great work you're doing for justice reform. And in your honor, the Boulder Rotary Club is pleased to contribute 100 doses of vaccine to the Polio Plus Fund.
Well, thank you so much, and have a
you.
great day. Thank you.